Time to have a look at market news now. Shares in Asia were higher with markets in Japan closed for a holiday. The Hang Seng Index was amongst the biggest gainers regionally, rising about 1.7% in its final hour of trading. Mainland Chinese stocks closed higher. When we look at what's happening on the European side, stocks were higher as well, reflecting positive global momentum after a stubborn start to the trading week. Investors in the region are waiting the latest monetary policy announcement from the European Central Bank, including earnings that could show the impact of the pandemic on business communities in Europe. And over stateside, U.S. stock futures were little changed in early morning trading. Of course, later on at 3 p.m., we have our MPC decision by Reserve Bank Governor Lesetja Kganyago, and we'll keep you updated on that particular front as we do that live broadcast. But to talk to us about what is happening from a markets perspective, we are joined by Patrice Rousseau, who is the Chief Investment Officer at Ashburton Investments. Patrice, thank you so much for your time. Let's get a check-in on the JSE, given the performance we've had over the past couple of weeks.
Good afternoon, Nastasia. Yes, the JSE really recovering from quite a sharp sell-off at the end of last week, really driven by two factors. The global context started to get increasingly worried about the increase in cases from the Delta variant, and also some bad economic numbers linked to higher inflation, and the fact that many investors were worried that the recovery had peaked, both in terms of economic growth and in terms of earnings recovery. And of course, in South Africa, the insurrection and looting that we had witnessed, which really impacted half of South African GDP, KZN and Gauteng, led to some of the investors taking profits and money off the table. All this as a background, we've seen a turnaround in sentiment really over the last day or so, probably linked to the fact that we're seeing some good numbers globally in terms of the global companies reporting. 86% of companies reporting in the US have beat expectations, and there's now a more positive sentiment that these companies are on a better footing in terms of being able to deliver earnings in the second half of the year.
Right. So as I mentioned in my intro, at 3 p.m. today, we have the Reserve Bank announcing its monetary policy decision. There are expectations that they'll probably keep the rate unchanged and will definitely or most likely adjust their growth outlook. What is the Ashburton House view on economic growth based on a background of COVID-19 numbers in South Africa and the recent unrest?
Very good question on growth. We believe that economic growth for the year would be a strong 4.1%. But I think in the light of what we've just witnessed over the last week, we're likely to revise these slightly down. So I think for the full year, we would be just below the 4% growth level, which is still a decent rebound from last year.
Okay, so let's go stateside. U.S. earnings season is still in full swing. What do you make of the performance of some of the companies that have reported so far? And also, what are you looking out for the other companies that are yet to release numbers?
Yeah, very good questions. Good results, some from very expected quarters. I was looking at Johnson & Johnson, obviously, in terms of demand for vaccines and their products, they've done very well. Coke as a reopening trade, as the consumers start to get out of their homes and start to go on their normal lives, also have benefited. And maybe just a matter of interest for your listeners, Harley Davidson as well, the very well-known motorbike manufacturer, also beat earnings. On the other hand, Netflix, who all of us know, has slightly disappointed. But you will remember last year, if you take a year-on-year comparison, as economies globally went into lockdown, a lot of people just were binging their series. So they had a very high base to beat. So we have a situation where a lot of companies are benefiting from the normalization of consumer habits, people going out more, traveling more, consuming in a different way, whereas those who were really work from home plays, like a Netflix, likely to disappoint markets in terms of their results.
Right. So key events that you're going to be keeping an eye on. I'm sure the MPC announcement today, but what else are you looking out for?
I think from a South African point of view, obviously despite some calm having been restored, I think it's quite important that everyone is looking towards actions that government are going to take to make sure we don't have a recurrence of events we've seen over the past weeks. I think that's quite important from our point of view and from an investor point of view. We haven't heard from rating agencies and the like, so we want to make sure that we can get assurances to investors that we've done very well. You mentioned the SARB. I think the inflation numbers, which are starting to pick up, I think are one that we're going to watch. We're going to listen attentively to the governor to hear whether that's something that worries him. The market actually, Nastasia, they have really discounted several rate hikes into the next year or so. We think that's a bit too negative. I think there's likelihood that the rate hikes expected will be revised down. I think that's where the inflation and growth expectations are quite key.
All right, Patrice, thank you so much for your time. Lots to also discuss. And I'm going to throw a question for next time when we do get a chance to talk, whether you and your team have managed to figure out what is happening with the US 10-year bond yield and why it's been reacting the way it has, whether you've made sense of that kind of performance. But we'll leave that question for the next time that you and I get to have a conversation. That is Patrice Rousseau, who is the Chief Investment Officer at Ashburton Investments. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll have the labor force, and then after that, followed by the alternative investor.